Production of Ruckus is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, the Hartwig family, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon. The Ruckettes join me shortly, and our topics this week: Missouri legislators leave Jeff City, the World Series of Barbecue leaves Kansas City, Missouri, and one columnist leaves us thinking that we will see Governor Kobach in 2018. Plus roast and toast. But we start with our interview segment and take a look at education policy, an issue that often finds its way to the Ruckus program. Our guest today is Michael McShane, Director of Education at the Show Me Institute in Kansas City. McShane's analyses and commentaries have appeared in numerous publications, including the Washington Post, U.S. Today, and the Huffington Post. He is co-editor of a new book, Educational Entrepreneurship Today. Michael McShane, welcome to Ruckus. Good to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, you're a native Kansas Cityan, and then you left Kansas City, and now you're back. Was it the streetcar that brought you here?
It was not the streetcar, no.
Tell me about your book. Is it designed for the general public, or is this something that only people involved in the education community would be interested in?
I think people involved in the education committee might be more interested in it, but I think anybody who's interested in improving our education system could glean something from the book, and a kind of forward-looking approach of how do we improve our school systems.
Where can you get the book?
I think it's available at your local online retailer.
Amazon and everywhere you can normally
I think everywhere you
get
can
a
normally.
book.
It's out with Harvard Education Press. Their website has it for sale too.
You talk about educational entrepreneurship. What does that mean exactly?
I mean, it's talking about innovative entrepreneurs, people who are trying to rethink the way we deliver education in the United States. So the way schools are operated, the types of tools or apps or resources that are available in schools, and also people who are rethinking the sort of teacher-leader pipeline, how we get folks into schools to work in them.
I read a piece of yours, and if I understood it correctly, you're saying technology may not be the great asset that people thought it was going to be in the classroom.
No, my co-editor of this book has a great line of this, is that technology is just a tool. It's a tool like any other tool that's used in the classroom, but it relies on teachers and leaders and people putting it to use. But thinking of it as sort of a panacea for all of the ills of the education system, I think is not the way to look at it.
What is your role at the Show Me Institute? It's a libertarian think tank.
Yes.
It was founded by Crosby Kemper III and Rex Singfield, names that we hear often in the news.
Yes.
The main headquarters is St. Louis.
Yes.
There's a branch office in Kansas City. What do you do there?
So I'm by training a researcher. So I have a PhD in education policy. I'm a social scientist. So I do a lot of research on Missouri's education system, but also kind of look around the country for other things that are working that we might be able to bring back to the state of Missouri. So I do kind of a mix of original research as well as that kind of policy analysis, or kind of, if you want to use the term, like thought leadership of.
No, I don't want to use that term.
Good. I don't blame you. It's a horrible term.
Let's talk in general about various aspects of education.
Sure. Happy to.
Charter schools, wave of the future.
I think in Kansas City, definitely. If you look at the enrollment trends we've seen over the past 5 or 10 years, you see sort of enrollment in the traditional public schools on the decline and enrollment in charter schools on the rise. And this sort of mirrors, not quite as dramatically as in Kansas City, but around the country, we're just seeing increasing enrollment in charter schools.
There was a big story the Washington Post did a few days ago that was in the Kansas City Star about resegregation of urban schools. Kansas City, Missouri is a perfect example, is it not?
Well, I mean, you look all across the country, there are about 14,000 school districts across America, and many of their boundaries are drawn along kind of historic racial or socioeconomic lines. And so as long as this is the way that we're going to choose to organize our schools, I think we're only going to serve to reinforce economic and racial segregation.
What's your prognosis for the Kansas City, Missouri school district? Certainly it's been a troubled district for decades. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say billions have been spent to improve the Kansas City, Missouri school district, and yet it is not fully accredited.
Well, that's the sort of question whenever you talk about education in Kansas City is, you've got the Kansas City School District, but right now it only educates about, 14 or 15,000 of the cities.
And it used to be 70,000.
It used to be at its peak in the early 1970s was over 70,000. But there's 11 or 12 other school districts. So there's a sort of question of what is the direction of education in Kansas City? And I think there are lots of bright spots there in the charter school sector and in some of the districts that somehow take over part of the city of Kansas City.
So maybe the Kansas City district should be broken up and pieces assigned to
Look, over time, people have offered different, whether we move to a more kind of much more reliant on charter school model and the district sort of goes away, whether it is dissolved in the other school districts around it. I mean, plans like this have been floated for, what, 15 or 20 years now?
We're down to a few seconds, but I do want to ask you about Kansas, where we hear about school finance. Is money that critical? How much the per pupil amount is that critical to children learning in the classroom?
Well, sure. I mean, money is obviously important. The problem is we don't know how much it costs to educate a student. So a lot of these debates end up kind of asking how many angels can dance on the head of a pin.
We don't know how to fulfill the constitutional requirement in Kansas to make suitable provision.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Exactly.
Nobody knows.
Exactly.
Michael, I appreciate your time. Book is out, Educational Entrepreneurship Today, and you can read his articles also at the Show Me Institute website. That is Michael McShane with the Show Me Institute. Now let's meet the panel and start a ruckus. Steve Glorioso is a media and political consultant. Cynthia Wheeler is a marketing strategist. Lisa Johnston is a columnist and political consultant. And Woody Cozad is president of the Cozad Company, a government relations firm. Good to have all of you here again. Nice to see you. Let's get started. The Missouri Legislature's 2016 session is over, and Woody is no longer being held hostage in Jefferson City.
Yay, Woody.
There were victories and defeats for both Democrats and Republicans. The GOP controls both houses of the legislature, so let's start there. First, we're going to ask Woody to outline 2 or 3 of the Republicans' best moments, and then ask Steve to offer the Democrats' version of what happened. So, Woody, how about the GOP highlights? What would you say they are?
Well, it wasn't, most of the stuff that passes is not very partisan. And so the kind of the low point for the Republicans to me was that the Senate leadership came out at the beginning of the session. Boy, they were going to kick the trial lawyers around this time. This time they were going to get them. I represent the trial lawyers by way of caveat. And they passed 2 bills about evidentiary rules very early in the session, within the first couple of weeks, sent them over to the House. And in the end, they did pass the House, but with margins that will not withstand a veto. They can't override a veto, and they're probably going to be vetoed. So they started like a freight train and then just ended with a whimper. The only thing big that, from an ideological perspective kind of thing was the constitutional carry, which includes the stand your ground language on concealed carry. The good things they did that needed doing, we passed a moderate compromise expungement bill, which is actually a bill that seals up to 1 felony conviction from the view of a potential employer, so he can't go get it. And that was worked out after a lot of discussion and compromise on both sides. We passed a desperately needed juvenile life without parole bill to conform to decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court. That one, again, was a compromise between 2 wings of the Republican Party. We passed a commercial receivership bill. Doesn't matter to you unless you rent property to people or rent from somebody. Then it may matter to you a lot. And so the biggest disappointment to me was we've had a foul up in the Department of Health on breathalyzers. And so there are a bunch of people who have been DWI or running around loose and nothing's going to be done to them. They could have fixed that and they didn't get it done.
What about voter ID?
Voter ID passed, but it passed without a filibuster by the Democrats or even an attempted filibuster because they watered it down. And so I don't know what the governor will do with it. If I were sitting in his seat, I'd sign the thing because if I don't, someday they may pass a really strong voter ID bill. I'd sign this and say, well, see, we took care of that problem and move on.
So it wasn't a big time for Republicans. This session did not produce big gains for the Republican Party, even though it controls
on the kind of stuff you read about in the Kansas City Star, no, not
all
at
right,
all.
Steve, what's the Democrat side?
Well, thank the Lord that the Republicans didn't pass. Woody used the term ideological. I think there were more ideological gaps. Issues than there were Democrat or Republican. With the Democrats having such a low number of both Senate and the House, they really are only in a position to try to block what they perceive as extreme measures by the far-right conservative Republicans. Well, like for example, an attempt to eliminate our earnings tax and send the city into fiscal chaos.
Religious Freedom Amendment?
That too, but even after the voters overwhelmingly approved the renewal, I would hope they wouldn't do that again. Also, an attempt to pass a discriminatory law against minorities, especially LGBT citizens of our state. Two things they couldn't block, and Woody alluded not exactly to it, but this, I call it crazy gun law, that allows a person who doesn't have a gun permit and hasn't finished training to be able to carry a concealed weapon. And lastly, voter ID, and I don't disagree with Woody, they probably ought to just sign it, but it's so hypocritical to try to lock down photo ID at the same time not allowing people with photo IDs to have early voting or easier registration. It's all about a partisan attempt to minimize Democratic votes.
All right, Lisa, we heard nonstop about the need for ethics reform in Missouri. Apparently nothing much happened with regard to ethics reform?
It was a meager attempt at best, and that's probably being kind to call it meager. It's they said, there's the 6-month waiting period now, but they really didn't dig in and do their due diligence there, and that was a disappointment. And frankly, I think the residents of Missouri should be disappointed that more big picture things that really help everyday people didn't get done. Everything that gets done seems like it's so far down in the weeds, or there are all these attempts to try to legislate social issues and morality, which I think is not the role of government.
And there was thought, Cynthia, that the legislature would try to end the earnings tax in Kansas City. That failed. Do you think we'll see an attempt again in subsequent years in Jeff City?
I don't think so. I would hope not. But, again, I have to speak to what Lisa said. You never know. We all early on thought Trump wasn't going to be where he is, the man whose name I
No,
hate.
Lisa did think he was going to be where he is.
Yes, I went out on that limb.
That's true. Lisa did go out on that. I stand corrected. But I do think the issue with voter fraud is ridiculous. I see it as a way to disenfranchise young people, to keep them away from voting. I mean, if you're going to regulate that on any state or government level, then if I don't pay for my Social Security card, I shouldn't have to pay for my ID card. I mean, at some point, we have to relinquish the fact that this isn't just about making sure there's no fraud. The level of fraud has been proven to be minimal, if not any, and that disturbs me that Missouri and Kansas are so focused on that.
That would be news to the guys at George Mason in coordination with Harvard, who found that in presidential elections, 6% of the aliens in this country, legal aliens,
6%.
People who have jobs here,
not 50, not 40, 6%.
6% are
but
voting,
if I gave you
which
an
is
ID
more than
when you were
enough,
born, just like I
more
gave
than
you a Social
enough
Security
to elect
card,
Al Franken
you
to
would
the
be
Senate
okay.
and pass
no,
Obamacare.
I don't agree. If I
I
gave
wish
you
you
an
had
ID,
started this argument earlier. Now we have to go on. Kansas City Star columnist and frequent Ruckus panelist Steve Rose is looking ahead to the post-Brownback era when Kansas has a different governor. Reviewing possible GOP candidates for the 2018 primary, Rose dismisses Congressman Mike Pompeo as a reliable fanatic and Congresswoman Lynn Jenkins as too well-balanced to win. The likely winner, Secretary of State Chris Kobach, described by Rose as chasing non-existent voter fraud in Kansas, despite the fact he has not prosecuted one case. Rose doesn't mention Democratic possibilities, saying he just doesn't really know of any. So a couple of questions. What do you think of Rose's analysis of possible GOP candidates? And Lisa, are there no Democrats wanting to be governor of Kansas?
Great questions. Well, first of all, on the Republican side, I think Steve did an excellent job of highlighting some of the folks who are going to be top contenders. And in my opinion, though, probably less likely Lieutenant Governor Collier and less likely Lynn Jenkins than Secretary Kobach and Representative Pompeo. I see those as the two most likely. Secretary Kobach is obviously ambitious. He's an articulate man, but often articulates very wrong-headed policies. But he certainly would be interested in moving up. And I think a primary between Kobach and Pompeo would be fascinating. I think that would be a difficult challenge for each of them in its own right. On the Democratic side, I think he's absolutely right. There's not a lot of activity there yet. I have heard rumors, although I haven't talked to Paul personally, that he is considering running again. I'm just not sure Davis 2.0 is going to be successful. If he couldn't succeed against the least popular governor in the United States. I'm not sure he's going to succeed if he runs again.
Refresh my memory. How close did he come, Davis, to winning?
It was quite close. It was within 1 point something percentage points, I believe. I don't have it committed to memory.
A little bit more, maybe closer to 2.5 or so.
Okay.
Steve,
But close.
If the legislative elections in Kansas this November turn out a lot of Republicans, as some people forecast, and a lot of Democrats populate the legislature, do you think we'll see Democrats coming forward expressing interest in running for governor?
Well, there's got to be somebody over there. I'm not exactly steeped in Kansas Democratic politics, but the Democrats have won the governorship over there quite frequently, actually. You can think of Sebelius and Carlin and others.
Joan
Parkinson.
Finney.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Just not recently.
Mike, how about you?
That's why we have the school finance debate
Mike,
going on.
and you
Joan
guys have
Finney.
Mike Hayden, but it works out in the end. I think it'd be pretty easy to beat Kobach if you had a good, well-funded Democratic candidate. He's a little too damaged goods, and the state is in such bad shape. I doubt if he could do Brownback a third term for Brownback.
And Woody, we don't know that Kobach has any interest in running for governor. He may be interested in running for senator, or he may be interested in pursuing life in the private sector. He hasn't said, as far as I know.
Well, no, he hasn't, but I think everybody assumes that this is something he wants to do. Governor's one of the best jobs there is. You go to the Senate, you're one of 100 people. You go to the Congress, you're House of Representatives, you're one of 435. If you're governor, you can actually do something and make a difference. It's not normally done in Kansas, and Brownback, for good or ill, has rocked the boat, which is not the norm in Kansas, not the norm in Missouri either, for the governor to make a difference. But he can, or she can, if they set out to do it.
Yeah, and people, I think, too often dismiss Kobach without realizing what a well-educated man he
very
is.
smart.
I mean, he has a doctorate. Is it from Oxford? One of his degrees is from Oxford, another one from Harvard or Yale, a PhD and a law degree. This is no idiot.
We call him miseducated. And therefore,
Well,
Cynthia,
I wonder how the Supreme Court ruling affected him in the last 2 or 3
Nothing.
days.
Well,
that's a question.
He's
that I think
appealing.
we
He's
should-
appealing. And it was
He's
a question
appealing it,
about voter registration being required,
Yeah.
or proof of citizenship being required.
But he's taking the
before
same
you
track
register.
that Graves took from Secretary of State to governor, only Graves was not as, shall we say, flamboyant and loud as Kobach. But I'm not.
Graves was a good governor.
He was a
more
good.
or less,
I mean, when I say not as loud
Yeah.
and I want to say reality TV, smoke and mirrors, has Kobach, and I think the recent articles don't put him in a particularly bright light. When you have emails where you're questioning, okay, is this intentional? Because let's be honest, when you start talking about voters' rights, the issue for me is it's about poor and impoverished minorities. And when you start looking at the way the country is shaped,
we have
you
to wrap it
issues.
up. Those of you interested in reading more about Kobach, there's an editorial in Thursday morning's Kansas City Star that's not positive, and right above it is an editorial about Governor Brownback, which is not exactly positive either. A long-time Kansas City, Missouri tradition is en route to Kansas City, Kansas, and some think this move is a prelude to a bigger one that will be permanent. Citing possible conflicts with a World Series baseball game at the sports complex, the American Royal is moving its World Series of barbecue to the Kansas Speedway. The American Royal has been looking at moving its operations from Kemper and the West Bottoms for a while, and Wyandotte County and Kansas Governor Brownback have shown considerable interest. Kansas City, Missouri officials refused to tear down Kemper Arena and build a smaller facility as the American Royal had wanted. Now the City Council is moving toward a deal with Fouch Brothers to turn Kemper into a youth sports facility. So what about all of this? Would a move of the American Royal to Kansas City, Kansas be something that would likely be in the Royals' best interest and in the best interest of KCK?
Well, I mean, it would be a shame if the Royal would move to Kansas City, Kansas, and specifically.
Well, why do you say that?
Well, because I think it's more smoke and mirror and Brownback's attempt to draw attention away from himself. The reality of it is the American Royal is steeped in history here in Kansas City, in Westport, in cattle. to try to entice something over to the other side of the state. We seem to want to go back and forth. You know, Missouri is either enticing, Kansas is either enticing, and I think Steve Rose did a great job when he wrote his article speaking to that enticement. But the leadership and Brownback, to me, seems to be using this to draw attention away from his
I thought it
poor
was more
leadership.
of the initiative of the American Royal to seek
Well,
out
I don't think
other
it was their
locations.
initiative.
They went to
My
Independence.
understanding from inside is the reason they did the move
Yeah,
was...
they talked to somebody in Independence. They've
I
talked
thought
about
they
all
did.
sorts
Yeah,
of
but
other
my
sites.
understanding is the reason for the move was
Well, they don't have what
specifically
they
the
want in the
Royals.
West Bottoms.
No, they don't have what they want in the West Bottoms.
Kansas
But the
has
argument
star
is
bonds.
not
Well,
whether
West
or not
Bottoms
they
wasn't
want to
good.
move. It was why they chose to.
But the
And they've
question-
chosen to. And the question that has been created by the governor is, well, if they're going to make you move for the next 2 years, why don't you consider coming over here with a star tax? And then the
Sure.
question becomes, how does a governor or someone initiate that star tax? I thought, and my understanding was, that is a community endeavor. So again, to go from one area to the other, it would be a shame.
Well,
I understand that the governor is lobbying for it, no doubt. But the question remains, if the Royal were robust and thriving, would any of this be coming to bear? And I realize there's a great history, great tradition, but it seems like perhaps it is time for there to be a transition and for them to move to something new that could allow them to thrive.
Well, Woody, you've
Jinx.
paid attention to the
Jinx, yeah,
American
you
Royal for a long
disagree.
time. I know
I
your
dis-
wife's
I-
active in the horse industry. What are your thoughts about what's going
The
on?
horse industry.
They don't.
Well, don't you? Does she have horses?
She owns a half a dozen of them.
Yeah.
Oh.
My
See,
wife
if you
is
knew what
not.
you were talking about, you wouldn't ask these questions. Steve.
He wants to pick on
Linda-
you and me. He just disagrees with me all the time.
Linda is not a high maintenance woman, but her horses are high
Yeah.
maintenance. Anyway, they don't want the livestock shows down there. Let's get this straight.
The American Royal
The
or
city.
the city council? Okay.
If you put a horse show into the Hale Arena, not Kemper, into Hale Arena, they make everything as hard and as expensive on you as they can possibly make it. And they have said right out to one woman who stages a very successful horse show in Hale Arena, you know, we don't want you here. If you want to literally plug in a fan on your horses to keep them cool, and you want to plug it in, you got to call the city guy. He comes over, plugs it in, and you get a bill for that. And they want you out of there. So, and they feel pretty much the same way about the Royal. You tear down, or you turn Kemper into a kid's sports arena. Where do you hold the horse show? So you've got to build a facility someplace. The city doesn't want to build.
So the American Royal is legitimately looking for some
for a
place to
place
go.
to go.
Whether Sam
Absolutely.
Brownback's trying to attract them or
And-
not, I think
Well,
the city
I
of Kansas City,
understand that, but I
For
Kansas,
don't
is
Kansas,
a
I
county.
would say to the Kansas people, if you're going to build this facility, don't just build it for the Royal.
I think it would be
you
a
can
shame
hold
and a
horse
sad,
shows and
sad
other
state.
livestock shows and dog shows and cat
It
shows
could be a
for
win-win.
profit.
Yeah, I'm big on
Yeah.
cat shows.
Absolutely.
A
Lisa,
win-win for Kansas City, Kansas. But again,
what about this Fouch Brothers provision that's being thought about for Kemper Arena, this youth sports facility? A good idea, do you think?
Well, I think it has potential. I mean, no one can predict the future, obviously, but that's certainly an area that is popular and growing. They would have to, I think, be sure that they are including in their facility provisions and the ability to host events for sports that are popular in the area. That's
And
really
West
important.
Bottoms is a growing,
Yeah, but it
thriving area.
wasn't, the barbecue thing had outgrown. It's too hard to get there. But one more thing Sam Brownback's done. He's obviously jinxed the Royals by getting into this conversation.
oh my God, I love
that,
that.
that,
Get about
the, that the
Royals.
barbecue thing would be at the stadium and we might have another World Series. See what's
Well,
happening?
it's not Sam Brownback who said that, I don't believe. Anyway, it is time now for Roast and Toast, where the Ruckettes offer perspective or invective about people and events in the news. And we begin this time with Woody.
I've actually read Madison's notes on the Constitutional Convention. There isn't a word in there anywhere about where people pee. And yet, as Mark Stein says, we now, at this late date, have acquired a federal bathroom czar. And the establishment in both parties still remains mystified about why the people think they've lost their minds.
All right, Steve. Speaking of people who've lost their
Yeah,
minds.
there we go.
Steve.
See what I'm saying? I want to toast the leaders of the Crossroads Arts District. They're working diligently to keep their neighborhood from being overrun by bars and nightclubs. I live in the Crossroads now, and we are certainly in jeopardy of ruining the character of that district. We have an entertainment district 5 blocks to the north. The council recently passed and jammed through in lightning speed a change in the liquor laws. that would hinder the efforts by the Crossroads and other areas to keep unwanted bars and nightclubs out of their neighborhoods. What it does, in short, is allows people blocks away to have a say on what happens on your street or in your immediate neighborhood. They have started a petition drive to try to ask the council to reconsider the ordinance. I would urge people citywide, this impacts the entire city, to give us some help.
Lisa.
A timely roast for Governor Brownback, who yesterday announced yet another $100 million in budget cuts necessitated by his futile and irrational attachment to tax policy, for which there is ample evidence over 4 years. The verdict is in, and it's not working. Given the degradation of services and priorities in Kansas, our state is feeling much less like our motto of ad astra per aspera, to the stars through difficulty, and more like ad infernum per astra, to hell through difficulty.
Cynthia.
My roast today is to both the Republican and Democratic parties for providing us really sad example of what politics should be. And it's more like reality TV and smoke and mirror than I've ever seen in my entire 50 years on this planet.
I thought you were much younger.
Oh, much younger.
And finally, here is a roast to Senator Bernie Sanders, who actually said this while appearing on MSNBC and talking to Rachel Maddow.
What's the solution to corporate media?
I think we have got to think about ways that the Democratic Party, for a start, starts funding the equivalent of Fox Television.
Bernie, you're on MSNBC. That stands for mostly snide news bashing conservatives. The Democrat network you want already exists, and you were on it. And that is Ruckus for this time. Back next Thursday at 7. Now for the Ruckettes of the crew, Mike Shannon saying thanks for watching and good night.
We raise our glass to you.